Maybe you clicked out of curiosity, or maybe, without realizing, you were looking for a quiet place where stories unfold slowly and silence is part of the conversation. I wrote this one gently, like stitching together memories, hurt, and small truths, hoping that somewhere along the way, you might see a piece of yourself. If that happens, even just for a moment, stay. Listen as long as you'd like. And if you feel something, anything, leave a sign. Not a big one. Sometimes a quiet "I'm here" in the comments is more than enough. And if you feel like it, sharing or subscribing helps me keep telling stories like this. I'm 32 years old. My son, Luke, is 7. A few weeks ago, he was diagnosed with a rare blood disorder that's threatening his life. The doctors say a bone marrow transplant gives him the best shot, but it needs to come from a close genetic match. Ideally, a relative. Here's the thing. I don't have any. Well, biologically I do, but not in the way most people think. I'm the son of an affair. That's how my mom always put it. She raised me on her own, working late shifts and weekend jobs, and every time I asked about my dad growing up, she'd go quiet for a second and then say the same thing. Your father has a real family, a wife, kids, a mortgage. We're not part of that world. We never were. And I got it. I learned early not to ask questions, not to expect anything. The man whose blood I carry was someone I was taught to avoid, not hate, but pretend didn't exist. Except I did meet him. Once. It was during my second year of college. He called out of the blue and asked to meet. I didn't even know how he got my number. We met at a coffee shop near campus. He sat across from me like I was some distant acquaintance. No hug, no sun, no eye contact longer than 3 seconds. He handed me an envelope and said it was for tuition. Then he stood up, wished me luck, and walked out. There was no follow-up, no call, nothing. I didn't take another dime from him after that. I didn't want charity. I wanted acknowledgement, and I never got it. So I made myself a promise that day. My kid would never feel like a secret. And for 7 years, I kept that promise. Luke knows who I am. I show up. I read bedtime stories. I dance like an idiot during kitchen breakfasts. I've built everything in my life around that little boy. But now, I'm facing something I can't fix with love or money or late-night runs to the pharmacy. He needs marrow, and biology is louder than silence. So here I am, 32 years old, about to knock on the door of the man who never called me by name and ask him and his family to save my child's life. After the diagnosis, the hospital handed me a thick folder of paperwork and a lot of big medical terms. But one line hit harder than the rest. Best chances of success. A full biological sibling or parent match. I don't have siblings, not the kind that were ever in my life anyway. My mother's an only child, no close cousins, no miracle donor in the family tree. So that left him, the man who made me but never really saw me. The night after Luke fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. His number was still saved. I'd never deleted it, probably out of some stubborn mix of pride and masochism. I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I called my mom. She came over the next morning. I told her everything. The diagnosis, the odds, what the doctor said, the marrow. And when I told her I was thinking of reaching out to him, she didn't raise her voice. She just closed her eyes for a long moment. "You don't owe that man a damn thing," she said. "And he never gave us anything but silence. Don't let them laugh at us again. Please." There was something in the way she said "them" that hit hard. She didn't just mean him. She meant them, the family he stayed with, the house behind the fence, the polite, shiny version of life we were never part of. I knew she was protecting me, like she always had. But this wasn't about me. This wasn't about her either. This was about a 7-year-old kid with Star Wars pajamas and a scar on his wrist from a scooter fall, who just wanted to go back to school and finish his dinosaur diorama. This was about my son. So that night, after brushing Luke's teeth and setting his water by the bed, I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up the phone. And I called the man who never called me anything. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched public records. I found a property listing under his name, still at the same address from over a decade ago. A quiet suburban neighborhood less than an hour away. I stared at the screen for a while, trying to imagine what his life looked like now. Whether he still mowed the lawn himself. Whether he'd told his kids they had another brother out there. Whether they even knew I existed. I didn't care if they welcomed me or slammed the door in my face. This was about a 7-year-old kid with Star Wars pajamas and a scar on his wrist from a scooter fall, who just wanted to go back to school and finish his dinosaur diorama. This was about my son. So that night, after brushing Luke's teeth and setting his water by the bed, I walked back to the kitchen. I picked up the phone, and I called the man who never called me anything. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched public records. I found a property listing under his name, still at the same address from over a decade ago. A quiet suburban neighborhood less than an hour away. I stared at the screen for a while, trying to imagine what his life looked like now. Whether he still mowed the lawn himself. Whether he'd told his kids they had another brother out there. Whether they even knew I existed. I didn't care if they welcomed me or slammed the door in my face. I was done carrying other people's shame. Luke needed marrow, and I would walk straight through hell if it gave him a chance. It took me 3 passes to pull into the driveway. I told myself I was just making sure it was the right house, but really, I was stalling. It was one of those quiet cul-de-sac homes with a basketball hoop above the garage and an American flag out front. 2 cars in the driveway, both newer than mine. The kind of place you'd never expect to hold a secret like me. I parked at the curb, walked up, rang the doorbell. My heart pounded like it was trying to outrun the rest of me. I had no plan, no script, just a manila folder in my hand, and 30 years of silence sitting in my throat. After a few seconds, the door opened. But it wasn't him. The guy standing in front of me looked to be in his mid-20s. Athletic build, sharp jawline, dark hair like mine. His expression was polite, cautious, maybe assuming I was there to sell something. "Can I help you?" he asked. I studied his face a beat too long. Something about the shape of his eyes. The way his brow furrowed. It was like looking at a version of myself that had grown up under different circumstances. "I think I'm your brother," I said quietly. His eyebrows pulled together. He tilted his head slightly, like I'd spoken another language. "What?" I think I'm your brother," I repeated, a little firmer. "Half-brother. My name's Nathan." He didn't say anything, just stared. And in that silence, I realized he really had no idea I existed. A voice came from inside the house. Female. Older. "Who is it, Drew?" He turned back briefly, then looked at me again. You should come in for a second." I stepped into the foyer, shoes still damp from the wet grass. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and there were framed graduation photos lining the hallway. One of them was him. Another, a woman about his age, probably a sister. I couldn't stop looking. This was the life I'd never been invited to. Drew, he'd introduced himself as we walked, asked me to sit down in the living room. He disappeared for a minute. I heard hushed voices in the kitchen. When he came back, there was a woman with him, late 50s, blonde, kind eyes, but cautious. "Hi," she said gently. "I'm Marlene. Drew said, you might be—" I nodded. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I need to talk to your husband." His name is Paul. Paul Maddox. He's my biological father. The look on her face changed instantly. Not anger, not denial, shock, then hurt. Like a curtain pulled back on a wound she thought had scarred over decades ago. Her voice was soft but firm. Paul isn't home, and I don't think he ever told us about you. I nodded again. I figured. I handed her the folder. My son's sick. He needs a bone marrow transplant. The doctors said biological matches give the best chance. I don't want anything else from you. I just need someone from this family to get tested. She took the folder but didn't open it. I could feel the tension in the room settling like fog. Drew stood there with his arms crossed, eyes on the carpet. Marlene sat down, still holding the folder like it might explode. I'm not here to dig up the past, I added. But my son didn't ask for any of this, and if there's even a small chance someone in this house can save him, I had to knock. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then Marlene exhaled, barely audible. Let me call my husband. They offered me coffee. I said no, but I appreciated the gesture. It was one of those quiet, overly polite things people do when they don't know what else to do, like handing a life raft to someone who's already drowning. I sat on the edge of their beige sectional couch. Everything in the room looked curated. Matching throw pillows, perfectly dusted picture frames, a fireplace mantel lined with family photos. There were 3 kids in those photos. Graduation caps, prom poses, a ski trip in Colorado. A Christmas morning shot with matching pajamas and golden retriever in the frame. One of the boys, Drew, I assume, was holding a trophy. The girl had a college hoodie on. The youngest, a kid maybe in his early 20s, grinned with braces in every photo. They were happy, secure, normal. And all I could think was, this is what my life might have looked like if I had been part of it. Instead, I grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with cracked linoleum floors. Mom worked double shifts at a diner and took in laundry from neighbors just to keep us afloat. I started delivering newspapers at 10. I learned how to reheat canned soup and stretch groceries to payday. There weren't any ski trips. There were power shutoffs and eviction warnings. I never asked for more because I knew we didn't have it. But now, sitting there, I realized how much more there had actually been to miss. It wasn't just money. It was belonging. A door that was open. A father who showed up. A name that meant something. I looked over at Marlene, Paul's wife, and she hadn't moved. She sat in the armchair across from me, the folder still resting in her lap, unopened. Her face had shifted. It wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't suspicion either. It was something quieter, sadder. Maybe she was replaying something from long ago, a late-night phone call, a business trip that didn't make sense, a strange charge on a credit card. The kind of red flags that get buried for the sake of peace. I didn't know what she was thinking, but I knew what I wasn't here to do. I'm not here to blow up your family, I said, finally breaking the silence. I'm not here to ask for a seat at the table. I just need help, that's it. She looked at me then. Really looked. And it wasn't hate I saw. It was weight. He told me it was one mistake, she said quietly. 30 years ago, a business trip. He said it never went further than that. I didn't say anything. She already knew the answer. She blinked, swallowed hard, and looked down at the folder again. Then she nodded, just once, barely. Let's get them tested. In that moment, I realized she wasn't angry at me. She was grieving the lie she'd lived with for 3 decades, and somehow, I was the proof that lie had roots. The next day, I came back with a manila envelope, this one thicker than the first. Inside were Luke's test results, the transplant recommendation, and the full marrow compatibility workup from the hospital. I handed it to Marlene as soon as I walked in. I kept my voice steady. I'm not here to reopen old wounds. I'm just asking for a blood test. That's it. No obligations. This time, the whole family was in the living room. All 3 kids. Drew, the guy who'd opened the door. A younger guy in a hoodie named Tyler. And their sister Rachel, who stood behind the couch like she didn't want to sit too close. The air felt tight, like no one wanted to be the first to speak. Then Tyler said it. The thing I knew was coming. "How do you even know you're his kid? I mean, anyone can say stuff like this. It's a hell of a thing to drop on a family." He wasn't rude, just blunt, defensive. I could see the tension in his jaw. This wasn't about me. It was about what I represented. I looked right at him. "I don't know it for certain. I've never taken a paternity test. He never offered, and I never pushed. I don't care what you believe about me, but a doctor believes someone in this family might save my son's life. That's all I need." No one responded. "If none of you want to help, just say so. I won't come back." But I had to try. For a long second, all I could hear was the hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Then, quietly, so quietly I almost missed it, Marlene spoke. "You'll get your answer." I turned to her. She had tears in her eyes now. Not the kind you wipe away out of embarrassment. The kind that just sit there, refusing to fall, because you're trying so damn hard to hold everything in. "We'll get tested, all of us," she said, then looked at her kids. "Right?" They didn't argue, and I didn't thank them, not out of pride, but because I knew this wasn't about gratitude. It was about survival. For Luke, the test results came back 5 days later. I got the call while sitting beside Luke's hospital bed, watching him sleep through another round of meds. The nurse told me the bone marrow team would follow up, but then paused, just long enough for me to know what was coming. "You're a confirmed half-sibling match to all 3, she said. "That means the paternity is almost certain." I didn't say anything, just closed my eyes for a second, not out of vindication, just exhaustion. 30 years of silence had finally ended in a blood sample. Later that evening, I returned to their house. This time, I brought Luke's photo album. Nothing fancy, just a cheap binder filled with printouts from Walgreens. Marlene looked through the photos slowly. Her hands trembled on a picture of Luke wearing a cardboard crown on his 6th birthday. He looked so proud. "He looks like Drew at that age," she whispered. Drew stood behind her, silent. "None of you are obligated to do this," I said. "I understand if it's too much." "It is a lot," Rachel admitted, "but it's not your fault." That hit me harder than I expected. I took a breath and told them a few stories. Not dramatic, just real. How I once walked 6 miles with my mom to get to a clinic because we couldn't afford gas. How I stood outside this very house when I was 10, holding a birthday card I'd made, only to be told by the housekeeper that Mr. Maddox wasn't available. How my mom once begged him to come to my high school graduation. He never replied. I scanned the crowd anyway, just in case. When I looked up, none of them were speaking. Rachel was wiping her eyes. Marlene had quietly set the photo album on her lap and covered it with both hands, like she was trying to hold in everything it represented. I didn't want revenge, or money, or apologies. I just wanted someone in that room to say, "We'll help." And even without saying the words, I could feel it in the room now. They believed me. They saw him in me. They saw Luke. I'd been in their lives for 2 weeks now. Not as family, exactly. More like a complicated guest in a story no one volunteered to tell. We were waiting on the match results. In the meantime, Marlene checked in regularly. Drew drove me to the hospital once when my car battery died. Rachel sent over a care package for Luke filled with puzzles and books. Even Tyler, who had been the most skeptical, started texting me casually. Updates, jokes, questions about Luke's favorite superhero. But the one person who hadn't made a single appearance? Paul Maddox, my biological father. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't driven by the hospital. Nothing. So one Sunday afternoon, when I stopped by to drop off a signed medical release, I finally asked, "Where is he?" They all exchanged glances, like they'd practiced this conversation but hoped they wouldn't need to have it. It was Drew who finally said it. "He knows. He's known since day one. But he doesn't want to see you." I stared at him. Did he actually say that? Drew nodded slowly. He said, "If he lets you in, everything he's built falls apart. That he spent 30 years protecting Mom from this secret. That it would destroy her if she had to face it out loud." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not loud. Just that kind of bitter, tired laugh that lives in the back of your throat when the math of your life never adds up. "He said he didn't want it to destroy her?" I asked. "He already did that 30 years ago. She just didn't know it until I showed up." No one argued. Marlene stood in the hallway, quiet. Her face didn't change. She didn't defend him. She didn't cry. She just looked done. And I realized maybe she had known. Maybe not the details. But in the way people in long marriages know the parts they're not supposed to ask about. The parts that hurt too much to hear out loud. I thanked them for their time and picked up my keys. Rachel followed me to the door. "You don't have to go," she said softly. "Yeah," I replied. "I do. Not because I'm angry, just I've already lived my whole life on someone else's terms. I'm not doing that anymore." As I stepped off their porch, Drew called out, "Hey, wait." I turned back. He walked over and held out an envelope. Inside were the test results, the match confirmation. "I'm compatible," he said. "Not a perfect match, but strong enough. The doctors say it'll work." I felt something tighten in my chest. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something deeper. Like the pain had a counterbalance now. "You sure you want to do this?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, Luke's my nephew, whether Dad wants to admit it or not." I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel forced. I wasn't walking away empty-handed. Not this time. A week later, the call came. None of them were matches. Not Drew, not Rachel, not Tyler. Close, but not close enough. I stood in the hospital hallway, staring at the floor tiles like they might rearrange themselves into better news. The doctor was kind, but firm. They'd exhausted all the immediate family options. "We'll keep searching the National Registry," she said. "But it could take a while." And Luke didn't have a while. I didn't cry, not right away. I think I was too numb, too tired to even feel fear. I just walked back into his room, sat by the bed, and watched him breathe. That night, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hi," the voice said. "This is Jenna. I'm Tyler's fiancée." I remembered her vaguely. She'd been at the house once when I stopped by. Friendly, curious, someone who didn't flinch when things got awkward. "I hope it's okay that I got your number from him," she added. "I wanted to talk to you." She asked if we could meet the next day. We sat on a bench outside the hospital, the autumn air cutting through my hoodie like it was nothing. She handed me a coffee without asking how I took it. "I got tested," she said, "when the others did. I asked the nurse if I could. I just didn't say anything to Tyler yet." I blinked. "Wait, you?" She nodded. "I'm a match, not just a partial one, a near-perfect match." My mouth went dry. "You're not even related." She shrugged, eyes watering slightly. "Yeah, weird, right? But genetics are funny like that." There was a long pause. Then she looked at me, and I'll never forget what she said. "Your son doesn't need a perfect family. He needs someone who will walk through fire for him, and I've seen that in you. You didn't ask for any of this, and you showed up anyway. So yeah, I'll do it." I couldn't speak. I tried. I really did, but nothing came out. Then, just like that, I cried. Not the kind of crying where you hide your face and apologize, the kind that just falls out of you when the weight has been pressing down for too long. She didn't say anything, just handed me a tissue and stared out at the parking lot like we weren't sharing something absolutely life-changing. It took me 32 years to find family, and somehow, it was a stranger who reminded me what love actually looks like. The transplant went well. Luke stayed in the hospital for a while, monitored, tested, watched like a hawk. But the signs were promising. His numbers were climbing. His energy came back slowly. He asked for jelly beans and cartoons and complained about the hospital food. It was the best kind of normal I'd ever felt. Jenna, the one who saved him, visited often, always with a quiet smile and zero expectation of being called a hero. Tyler held her hand tighter now. I don't think he ever saw her the same way again. He looked at her like she'd just rearranged the gravity in his world. A few weeks after Luke was discharged, I got a text from Rachel. "Mom wants to cook. Real dinner. Would you come?" I stared at the screen for a while. Dinner. That word never felt loaded before. Growing up, dinner was me and my mom, tired and quiet, reheating pasta or boxed mac and cheese, sitting across from each other with a TV playing in the background. No conversation about school or sports or, "How was your day?" It was survival, not tradition. But this was something else. So I went. They set the table for 7. Something that probably hadn't happened before. Everyone was there. Drew brought wine. Tyler made a salad and acted like it was rocket science. Rachel had a playlist going, and Luke sat at the corner of the table like he belonged there. Like he'd always been there. Marlene brought out a big casserole dish, something cheesy, warm, homemade. Tyler smirked and nudged me. "You'd better eat. Mom made this for you. First time she's ever used that recipe, apparently." Everyone laughed lightly. I just nodded, biting back more emotion than I expected. Not because of the food, but because of the seat. Because I had one. There was no plaque with my name. No ceremony. No speech. Just a plate, a chair, a place. I looked around the table, at this family I technically didn't grow up with, but who now knew what mattered. At Marlene, who had once sat frozen with a manila folder in her lap. At Rachel and Drew, who went from shock to support in a matter of weeks. At Tyler and Jenna, the couple who gave my son a second chance. There were empty spots, of course. One in particular. But I wasn't thinking about him. For the first time, I didn't need him to show up. I had enough. Paul Maddox never showed up. Not during the transplant. Not after the recovery. Not when Luke came home. Not when Marlene invited me for dinner. Not when Drew, Rachel, and Tyler added me to the family group chat. No text, no call, not even a silent nod from across a parking lot. And you know what? I stopped expecting it. That hope, the kind you carry around like an old house key, just in case the door might still open, it started to rust. And eventually, I let it go. But there was one thing I still needed to do. One morning, after dropping Luke off at school, I drove to the address I'd memorized but avoided. His home, the place where I once stood at age 10, holding a handmade birthday card no one took. I didn't knock. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want another rejection. I just pulled a folded envelope from my jacket pocket and slipped it into the mailbox. No return address. No name on the outside. But inside, I'd written, "Paul, you don't owe me anything. Not an apology. Not an explanation. You've built a life without me, and I've built one without you. But I thought you should know. Your children, the ones you raised, are taking care of the one you didn't. They've been more of a family to me than you ever tried to be. Your grandson is alive because of them. Because of Jenna. Because people chose to show up even when you didn't. I'm not writing this to shame you. I'm writing because I needed to say it out loud, to myself as much as to you. I'm a father now. I've loved harder and tried better than you ever did for me, and that's how I know. I'm not carrying your choices anymore. I've already lived the consequences, and now I'm done. I forgive you, even if you never ask me to. Nathan. I stood there for a moment, just long enough to breathe in the cold air. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel righteous. I felt light. For 32 years, I chased a version of closure I thought only he could give me. But it turns out, closure doesn't come from someone else saying, "I'm sorry." It comes from deciding to stop waiting. So I turned back to my car. I didn't look at the windows. I didn't check if anyone was watching. I just got in, started the engine, and drove home. To my son. To my life. To the family I found in the wreckage of a secret and chose to keep.